Not forgetting that button, of course. Everybody, welcome to another episode of Sonic Talk 314, recording today live Wednesday 22nd of May 2013. We are live and direct. You can watch us if you're not doing it this week. Maybe you can watch us next week, which is sonicstate.com/live, 4 p.m. UK time. And join us for our jolly japes and live video and all of those things as we talk about music technology and sort of mildly related subjects, depending on how the news, whether it's been a slow or a fast news week. I'm not sure what constitutes this week, but I do have a couple of guests with me. I'm going to start with, first I should say, of course, this show's been sort of sponsored by iZotope, and for those of you listening last week, there was a competition, and we have a winner for the copy of iZotope, Iris. I will announce that a little bit later, as well as news of another chance to win yet another copy of Iris. So stay tuned for that. But first, we'll go and talk to. Well, let's say hello to Dave Spears. There's his head sort of hanging down. Yeah. That's all right. I'll get you in the shot now. There you are. You're in. Dave Spears, G4 Software, and actually producer of said iZotope Iris software. Also, sat in front of his. .com modular there, which was making a noise earlier. You're going to turn it up again so I can have a listen.
Do you want to?
Yeah, go on.
I'm mucking about with audio rate modulation at the minute, so we've got a sequence. Forget that. And these kind of glitchy type patterns. And then we can put it into audio rate modulation.
Yeah, that you get that sort of vowling sound, don't you, with audio rate, as you bring in the in and out, as you bring in the depth, right?
Exactly.
That was something I was trying to demonstrate on the Korg MS-20 Q&A that I did, but just every patch, because I thought I'd done it before, I thought, yeah, I know how to do that, and every time I went to demonstrate it, it didn't work as I'd expected. It was really embarrassing. There was one unkind person in the YouTube comments who said, he was this joker. Every patch he goes for, he just gets wrong. And I had no defence, frankly, because he was absolutely right. He was just a little bit harsh in his judgment call.
I think there's one person who spends his entire life on YouTube just going around every single video he can find and just hitting the dislike button. Never telling anyone. He will never reveal his identity because he knows that if he's ever caught, he will be killed by about 1 million YouTubers.
I've learned not to take it personally. It's just
I don't care. God,
it doesn't matter really. It probably just kind of goes in and sits in my psyche and affects all my dreams. So I wake up every morning, just ever so slightly more bitter and twisted, but subconsciously, so I don't actually know it.
Yeah, brilliant.
Anyway, that other chuckle you heard there was Mark Tinley, so we better go to you. Here we go, Mark.
It was me.
I think third as well. I'll tell you what you could do, though.
Passive aggression.
Passive aggression. Do you think you could tip? Yeah, that's perfect, because I keep getting just your nose and above when I put the...
Stan Laurel, what's going on?
I've got a great tune. One of my favourite on the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia is one of my favourite tunes of all time.
Yeah, and mine. That was in the charts, though, when we were about 15 or 16, if you're the same age as me. It was.
You're absolutely right.
The charts for ages, wasn't it?
It was. Yes. Oh, well, I won't go on.
Along with Ernie, and he drove the fastest.
That's right. It was the decade of the comedy record and the Barron Knights. Yeah. But I imagine we're alienating an enormous number of non-US of US listeners now. I assume there must be some. So how are you, Mark? You well? Likebeing.com, wasn't it? There we go. And a member of TV Mania.
I just clicked on Twitter and I thought I'll tell everybody that I'm doing this podcast, and I'm following Nile Rodgers, and I saw a tweet and it said, I'm in this hotel in Ibiza, and I clicked on it and there's this amazing swimming pool, and I reckon that must be where Rich Hilton is. Actually,
yeah, well, he's on the road, isn't he?
In the same hotel, mustn't he?
Wow, nice gig.
So I've put a link in the chat room.
Rich Hilton, of course, is going to be playing in Bristol on Sunday night. I'm hoping to get to him on Saturday night for a catch-up for a drink, possibly. But
I think they've got a bit of a crazy schedule going on, because they were somewhere else the other day and then they flew back to New York and now they've gone to Ibiza. Then they're going back to New York and then they're going to Bristol. It seems like
it's not like the old days when they had Concorde.
Really.
They could do it on Concorde and drink champagne all the way.
Oh, well, Niall tweeted
throw party
yesterday.
streamers.
Niall tweeted yesterday that he was in first class and he asked for 2 glasses of water and got told off. So I guess you can't have champagne in first class anymore.
Wow.
Not even allowed a second glass of water.
Wow, that's harsh.
Bad, yeah.
Must have been, maybe it was very special water.
Undoubtedly.
Indubited. Anyway, thanks for joining us, Mark. That's our triumvirate this week. Triumvirate, even. Our triptych. And where shall we start? We shall start. Oh, yes, this is something that's been in the topic list for a number of weeks, but we've never quite got round to it. So I'm going to play it now, and hopefully you will see why it was there, and it's all good. Oh, no, that's not it. That's my daughter.
So I'm going to talk about circuitry and software.
This is
what we have here is the
Jaziri and his Mega.
An Arduino Mega and loosely inspired by the famous
Meganome
controller. The control surface consists of 84 square illuminated arcade buttons with extra light action, complemented by a number of continuous control sensors, including an XY joystick, 2 ebony pressure sensors, a proximity sensor, and 2 endless LED encoders. The case is made from solid 3/4-inch purple heart and accented with curly maple. The whole box weighs in around 25 pounds, and if we open up the hood,
oh my God!
Inside,
let's fast forward.
Is an Arduino Mega and a number of TLC 5940 LED driver chips.
Basically, this guy has this robot band.
It represents pitch space with the chromatic scale along.
And he's got this whole series of drums that are on sort of various attenuate. I don't know what you call them, sort of stepper motors,
so I can keep track of.
And he does this live performance, and this is what he uses to control them.
Laid out on a 2-dimensional grid.
It's absolutely bonkers.
Voicings and melodic motion that would be difficult, delay, downsampling, and bad pitch shifting.
Well, there you go.
Why robots? I mean,
this is the good one. This is the crunch.
Robots are expensive to build, time-consuming to make, and hard to move in and out of gigs. You know, drummers and guitar players and whatever. They can get themselves in and out of a club. So it is more work, but what you get out of using robots, or these, I call them robots, electromechanical furniture that plays drums. You get the control that you have with software, so you can do all the sequencing that you have with software and all the effects that you can do inside the box in a computer in a program like Ableton. But you have the tactile feeling of real acoustic drums. You have this sort of infinite micro variation of each drum hit, because no 2 drum hits are the same. And when you run something that's always slightly different through effects processors, the output has a certain tactile quality it's unlike using samples. So it's its own thing. And the other advantage of playing with robots is that it's very low drama. Like these guys are always on time for rehearsal.
I think that's the key,
we don't fight over creative direction or women, which is a good thing because these guys are machines.
Obviously got a little bit of sense of humour. What's that?
It's that old joke, isn't it? Difference between a drum machine and a drummer, but in this case, a robot and a drummer. You only have to punch the information in once to a drum machine or a robot.
It's bonkers, though. I mean, it seems like a fairly, well, on the surface of it seems like a fairly well-balanced individual, but then they can't be. Can he, really, doing that? I mean, that must take just, endless hours and hours and hours. And I imagine you go to a gig and all that getting the sort of micro distances between the things that you must just take such a long time to set up. It might be, the sound check and all that you must have to get there days beforehand to make sure it all works. But it's an interesting idea, and he built the electronics to do that as well, which is kind of it's just a crazy idea. But a band of robots. We do occasionally have robot items, and this is one of them. And Dave, you're a drummer. Have you ever heard? I mean, we were at Mesa and there's a robot band playing on one of the stages. Had a massive, very enthusiastic crowd, and there was no humans involved at all. I don't know.
It's quite strange, isn't it? I mean, I have to say, at first, I saw this. When was this? It was like a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it? This
Yeah, it
topic
was. Yeah.
was on the list, and I kind of looked at it first of all and went, because initially it looks like a kind of, begging a video for a Kickstarter money to do a controller. And I was like, oh, that doesn't look very nice. It looks like a really crappy old 70s dashboard of a car with buttons on. And then when he started playing it and doing all the kind of drum fills and the 16ths and the 8ths on the different line, I was like, oh, this is really intriguing. And then, of course, when it got to the robots, he is absolutely right in that, drummers generally do not hit the head in the same way or place exactly the same twice. So these kind of subtle variations are quite interesting from my perspective. And I kind of got, I've got really mixed feelings about it. On one hand, I think I'd be scared to be in the same room as this person if there was one knife in the room. And on the other hand, I'd really like to have a chat with him about, the philosophy behind the whole setup and the technical aspects of it.
Yeah, no, interesting. I know Rich, Harry mentions in the chat room James Taylor, anyone, and in fact,
yes,
because he did I can't remember what he's called, but Rich Hilton said he saw him, didn't he? With
a fantastic drum machine
with the kind of the giant white, and it just sounded like a nightmare to tour, but he did do it nonetheless. And but this is a level of obsession. I don't think James Taylor actually made it and invented it and kind of curates it himself, which this is the sort of thing that he's got that kind of when you're talking to a real hardcore programmer and they're talking to you and you can see that they're not really engaged, they're thinking about something else. He's like that.
Yeah, but chances are he might be thinking about dismembering you.
No, I'm sure he wouldn't.
No, there was a sort of moment, I was really enjoying it, and there was this sort of moment where I was quite enthralled and kind of looking at the video and then suddenly thought, actually, this guy looks quite scary on occasions.
Yeah,
and that
maybe
put a whole
so.
different slant on it. But hey,
I'll come back to you with a question actually about that humanisation thing. But look, Mark, what did you make of this?
Well, actually, I'm having a bit of a weird moment because I'm sure I've got deja vu because I think you said exactly the same thing last week about people who are programming things who have that vacant kind of, they're in the background kind of stare.
It's entirely
now
possible.
I'm trying to work out whether you've said it exactly the same way as you said it last week or if you said it very slightly different.
I've been doing a lot of programming actually the last couple of weeks.
It was. You did say it last week. Do you know what? I had exactly the same thing.
Oh,
yeah,
man,
yeah.
did I?
Brilliant.
Oh, wow,
Brilliant.
Bizarre. Excellent. Well, I'm nothing if not consistent, at least with that.
So what do I think of that thing? Well, I think every musical instrument should have curly maple on it. I think that's an important thing on a musical instrument. So I kind of quite like the idea that it's in an oldie worldy form factor kind of proper musical instrument box. But and then I don't really understand why there's 80 knobs on it, buttons on it. I just kind of counted through. I can see there's 5 banks of 16 and then 4 off to one side. But I didn't hear any triplets in anything that he was playing, and I didn't hear any dotted notes, it just all seemed to be like
Straight.
or but there was nothing like or that kind of so it seemed very gridded to the sort of 16ths, 8ths and quarter notes.
I didn't. Maybe that was just the particular piece we listened to. There is a whole bunch. You go to I think it's jazirimusic.com or .net. I'll have to look it up. Jazirimusic.com. I'll post a link in the in the chat room.
And then of course the problem with that style of playing music, and I'm going to call it playing music because it's playing music because there's a human being at the end of the interface doing it. It's like on the MPC 60. It's ever so difficult to actually hit. Everything's playing on the grid, and then to actually hit the buttons on the grid is actually quite difficult as well. So there's an incredible skill in what he's doing. But when he doesn't quite get it right, it sort of jars more than it would jar if he was just playing the drums himself or playing the percussion.
Because there's no... I suppose that's because there's no... You can't... If he starts out, he can't then make up the pattern within the rest of the rolls. So it's just like... And that would be... The whole thing would be out of time rather than get sliding back
just
into time.
feel it go slightly out because it's so tight, and then you just feel it go off. But then the fact that I can't play MPC, like when you're doing rolls on MPC 60s and trying to program stuff with those pre-programmed 16th note pads and things. I just can't do that at all. I mean, I'm nowhere close to it. So, I mean, it is quite an extraordinary skill that he's sort of doing that and doing it live and playing that. And I love robot things. I mean, the whole idea that somebody would build something that plays a real music instrument that has air around it and it moves air. So all your air temperatures are going to make a massive difference to anything that's going on. And the whole there's environmental elements making a difference to those drums all the time. So, I mean, there is that variation, even though it's a machine doing it, it's still got all of the other kind of variations. There's only like one fixed thing, as opposed to when we're making music with computers, so much of it is fixed. It's nice to see that being more organic.
Yeah, especially because our ears are very geared, or become more geared to recognizing patterns, I suppose. Which was going to get me back to you, actually, Dave, because when you're working on software synthesizers, how do you introduce that, or do you, that element of kind of randomness so that things are a little bit out, so they're not perfect every time, or they're not exactly the same every time? Do you work within certain parameters to try and create that kind of analogness into what you do?
It depends on the type of music. Yeah, I mean, if it requires it, I'll do everything pretty much in grid edit and just push and pull things and change velocities and stuff. I used to do this kind of pretty much full time, was basically edit other people's MIDI performances, on the various controllers. So I got pretty good at kind of knowing, if I nudge that to 141, then that'll give that a little bit of a push and whatnot.
Yeah, you start to recognise the grid the off-grid divisions.
Yeah, and I actually got really quite competent at, because I worked with several kind of session players for a long period of time, Bruford, for example, and stuff like that. You could give me a MIDI performance of his and I would know that it was him without you telling me that in advance.
So it's a real bit when they change the resolution of the sequencer and all of that knowledge is just tossed out the window.
Yeah, just gone. Yeah. But it was always very interesting. It was like, it became a bit of a challenge. So there's things like that, but also, subtle filter modulation on certain things can do that. But for me, and it was interesting that Mark was saying about everything being fairly static, 16, 32 or 8 notes. For me, it's grace notes. When you're drum programming, grace notes make all the difference. Those really beautifully subtle.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going slightly on an aside. I was watching the video for that new Abbey Road 50s drummer thing from Native Instruments. And the grace note programming and some of the jazz stuff on that is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, it really, apart from the fact they've mixed it so loud and you would never have heard it that loud in a record in the 50s, it sounds just truly authentic. It sounds like somebody playing a drum kit. And I'm sort of sitting there thinking, I can see how I could incorporate this into some, especially like the bossa nova is absolutely awesome. I might have to go and get that.
Interesting. One thing I was going to say, Dave, when I was asking you about the analogness, I was thinking in terms of within your actual instruments. So your emulations of analogness, do you build those into the software to a degree? And if and what degree do you do that, if you do?
What, in terms of drums or?
No, in terms of your synthesizers. The stuff what you make as GeForce.
Sorry, you've lost me for a
second. For instance, say the Oddity or Imposca, do you build in an analog sort of wobble factor into any areas of that so that it's not absolutely precise at all times?
No, I mean, if you model it properly, there will always be a kind of degree of analog drift, but the desire is to get as close as possible sonically to the original thing. So there are certain quirks that existed in the original synths. I forget what the Oddity thing was, but it was something like, the LFO wouldn't re-trigger after you'd played if you held 4 notes down and whatnot. And it's those kind of things that you have to kind of factor in.
Ah, okay.
But again, you can use that, within a composition, you can use that. So it's like, okay, so I want these to re-trigger, and then actually I don't want that to re-trigger. So, within the MIDI sequencer, you would do things. But, there's all sorts of trickery.
Howie, in the chat room, Howard Scar there, I imagine, I think it is, slop controls Diva work well for that. That's a rather unattractive name for a parameter, isn't it? Slop.
Slopping out.
Slop and slide. Slither, maybe that would be as well. You could have slop, slide, and slither. Maybe that's a show
quite
title.
good in the studio. Yeah, it needs a bit more slop.
A bit more slop. Yeah. Do you remember those?
I barely understand what somebody means when they say, "I want you to push the beat." I'm kind of like, what does that mean? Or I would lay back. And push and lay back are two terms that I've never really understood. I used to use one of those rushing dragon things in the studio with the lights on it, and I'd watch that thing moving back and forth, and I'm blowed if I could tell the difference between something when it was in time or it wasn't.
Oh, there was
that. I'm a guitarist.
There was that whole thing, wasn't there? I'm sure I've told this story before about the kind of playing to that people getting them to play to the Russian Dragon. The Russian Dragon was a kind of it's like one of those stage tuners with a big LED sweep, and basically that's the beat. That's behind or in front, I'm not sure. So it would show how soon or late your playing is, or the downbeat was against the beat. So, and I'm presuming there were some people who looked at it and knew exactly what they wanted to get from it in terms of delay. But it just sounds like an excuse to eat up studio hours, frankly.
I used to get really annoyed with people who'd say to me, "Your drums are flamming." And I'd have two kick drums on things, and they'd be going like, "That's not tight enough because the drums are flamming." But that's part of the whole, for me anyway, it's part of the whole magic of a dance remix, is that the drums are kind of just blipping in and out of each other, and that's what gives it the variation for me. It's like, I don't want the kick drums absolutely sample accurate on top of each other, because then you'd have no variation. It's when it's kind of, when the two beats are moving against each other, if you're using two beats, that I actually like that sound of the drums kind of flamming a bit and moving around.
Oh, as a drummer, that fills me with dread. Kick drum flamming kick drums.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have a kick drum and a snare drum and stuff like that. We get similar kind of thing actually a lot.
That implies a double bass drum pedal, doesn't it? There, really, in drum terms.
I sort of mean like millisecond inaccuracies. Like if you've got a Lin kick, the actual front edge of a Lin kick's not going to be the same as the front edge of your loop. So if it's playing, and if the Lin is absolutely quantized to 16ths, but the loop's got some variation in it, then the kick drum's going to flam at different points throughout the beat. But then, because the machinery isn't always perfect, things move around, especially in MIDI, you're going to hear different kind of, it's that really tight double triggered.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah,
I like it moving on and off the beat like that.
Yeah, I suppose that's what we've come, or what people have become used to, is this absolutely solid bass drum. And it used to be the case if you were using an MPC or a Lin or an Oberheim or whatever, that you just get this I mean, it would move a bit, but it would be pretty damn solid, and also the sound was solid. And when you layer things up, yes, you lose that kind of stuff. Interesting thought. I'm thinking this time it's probably time to go into our into a message from our sponsor, and I'll start with the message from our sponsor, and then I will we'll talk about the competition as well. So I'll play that now. So this is Isotope. The show is brought to you by Isotope. Isotope Iris. This is an amazing spectral synthesizer. You can actually natural intuitive selection of of manipulating audio visually, the image of your sound. You can draw, select individual events. You can shape, shift, and apply synthesis controls to your selections and layers, and loop and morph into new textures. You can sound sculpt and enjoy sort of lush filters, delays, reverb, chorus, and distortions for each layer. Sound libraries from all over the board. There's wood, glass, food, toys, vaults, altered and prepared objects, as well as crazy modular synthesizers with the Iris expansion packs. In fact, there's a whole lot of things you can do with this. It's capable of creating sort of quite traditional sounds, as well as completely mad, off-the-wall, sort of really unusual stuff. And the fact that it's got this visual aspect to it, it appeals to a slightly different creative flow, so you can get some very interesting stuff. Download the free 10-day trial, isotope.com/iris. And of course, we did say that there would be a winner from last week's show. And I think the challenge was to actually just to leave a comment that made us laugh or made appeal to me. And I do have a winner here. See if I can bring him up. It is let me see, where's he gone? Espen Storr. said, basically, I need Iris. He's doing albums and I'm bloody broke. I will use it for very far out sound design, I promise. And I just thought, yeah, I just like that totally sort of honest approach. There were some other crackers one. In fact, the one below it, which is Our Videos TV. I need the Iris. You need good weather. I think we can make a deal. I like the fact that he's prepared to change the weather for us. But so I will try and get in touch with Espen Storo, who is a YouTube user, and that's it. And also with this week, what we're going to do is actually have another competition that Isotope have very kindly given away another copy of Iris, and what you'll need to do, I think, is go to this URL here. I'm just going to post it in here, and this came up. Isotope themselves came up with this one, which I think is actually quite an inventive and unusual idea. And you need to go to WikiHow and look up how to write a haiku poem. And we want a haiku poem left in the comments that is somehow related to or is about Iris in some way. And if you need to know what a haiku poem is, you can go to how to write a haiku. I put this in the show notes, and also I'll just drop it down here. Let's have a look. If I throw that up there, you should be able to see it. Yes, how to write a haiku poem, and the best one will be picked either from the YouTube comments below or from the comments in the show notes, which also have a comment system, and then we'll pick a winner, and there'll be another copy of Iris to go. So you can't say fairer than that. Thanks again to Iris once again. Remember. I think this is the one I need. Yes, free 10-day trial, isotope.com/Iris. If you need to get hold of a 10-day evaluation copy to inspire you in your haiku, then I guess, that's what you need to do. Okay. Right, the next one is... we did robot control. Ah, yes. This is madness. Or if it's not, it will be in a minute when the video... Of course, this is Visage, reunited after 30 years since the last studio album for Visage. And they go through the history of it, of course. We've got they were kind of one of the signature bands of the 80s, I suppose. My camera's right in the way, so I'm going to fast forward a bit. And now they're doing a new album, looking a little less beautiful, perhaps, than they did. Although I'm still very impressed with the amount of hair that Steve Strange has. I'm fabulously jealous, actually. I don't know how he does it. He must be quite a lot older than me.
Songwriter.
So, a new album called...
And I was so excited about this album coming out.
Hearts and Knives.
New lineup, having Steve back.
And basically, they didn't use any soft synths or anything. But I must admit, I know, Dave, you passed this one on to me. What were your first thoughts when this came up?
Oh, plentiful.
I was thinking, oh my God, it's going to be terrible. Yeah, it's going to be awful.
Actually, Mr. CR78, who is a regular in the chat room, sent this to me, Alex, and it's really interesting because I left it a few days before firing the video up, and then I must check that video out before I forward it to Nick, and I fired it up, and it turned out that Carl and I were on tour with Barnacle, the bass player, many, many years ago. And actually, I was really disappointed how he didn't seem to have aged very much, certainly compared to me. So that was the kind of first thought. And then it was just that whole 1978 with Visage. This really, I worked at Russian's place for a bit, and there were...
That's Mr. Barnacle there.
There was some Steve, and there was Gary Barnacle, and his dad had a big band. They were from Dover, and it was like the Bill Barnacle Big Band, which I always thought was like one of the greatest names ever. And
that's a fabulous bit of iteration, isn't it? Yeah, it's just
superb. And he was, I liked Gary. He was, as Carl said, a solid bloke. And yeah, there was the whole connection with the Russian thing. Years ago, my folks moved house, and it was a kind of temporary move, and there was a big hill behind. I think I've said this story before, but I used to kind of sneak up the hill and have a cigarette. And this is like 1977, probably 77, maybe just touching 78. And I look across, and there's this house, and basically the Stranglers are going into this house. So I go and tell all my mates, the Stranglers have just been in this place up whatever the road was. And they're all just like, no, you're just not telling the truth again, are you, Spearsy? And Jack and Ori used to spring to mind. And it actually was, because it was Martin Rushant's first studio, which was in the garage of his house. And later on, when I met him and spoke to him a lot, and he said that actually it was probably his favourite studio of all time. Then obviously the Stranglers hit pretty big, and then he moved to Strictly Nice Lux Place on a hill. But what was funny is that when I then met Billy Curry years later and explained this whole thing, and he just kind of looked at me and laughed and went, "It's funny, isn't it? Because Martin used to go on about, you know, his punk roots, but Henley-on-Thames, it's not exactly punk central, is it? Because it is the last bastion of Middle England round here." So it's really funny. All of these things kind of merged together. The idea that it was being done with analog synths appealed to me. Although I have to say that there's a really strange. I'm not criticizing this move at all, but there's a really strange thing. Software at the minute is not particularly hip. You know, analog is everything and has been for a few years. And we know of several albums where people purport to use the original instruments, but they don't. They use the software. So, you know, I always kind of have an element of, there's a bit tongue-in-cheekness going on here. But in this case, I think it's genuine.
I must admit, the one thing I did notice about this, because I was listening to it, and I was really sort of, I was inwardly cringing, expecting it to be, you know, not all it could be, because Steve Strange does, you know, he's a bit of a casualty of the age, shall we say, you know, but he's survived, and that's great. And I wasn't expecting it to be any good. And then I listened to it, and I thought, actually, it's really got the, you know, there's a continuity even after all this time. And I was looking at there's a teaser on SoundCloud, and you look at the waveforms, and it's great that they haven't toothpasted it. They've sort of produced it in a way that the waveform would probably look like back then as well, and it really is quite refreshing actually. And that was the thing. You know, I don't think there's any of these sort of classic anthemic fade to greys on it or anything, but there's some nice stuff on there from what I hear, and you know, from the taster. And I just thought, well, that's great. You know, I'm really pleased with that, because so often it can go horribly wrong in this sort of scenario.
I just like that idea that there's an attempt to capture the original spirit. You know, whether they've done that remains to be seen. But, you know, I like that attitude. I really do.
I've got to show this. This is in the chat room. This is Sonic 3188. Let's see if I can get it just quickly. I have to scroll up a bit. But apparently barnacles probably have the largest penis to body size ratio of all the animal kingdom. It's just a fact that sort of went past, and I felt it had to be drawn attention to. Anyway, I don't know. Mark, can you follow that with something about Visage?
No, but I know that ducks have massive penises. And they're like huge, massive corkscrews.
I think
I've
heard that.
has a penis which is about 3/4 of a mile long, I think. So I'm not sure
Really?
that that's true. I don't think the barnacle, well, unless a barnacle has it coiled forever, Brad. But anyway, that's a complete aside.
It's probably got no width, I'd imagine.
I like the drums. I think I'm really becoming an evangelist for like these little blippy bloppy drums. I think they should become, you know, it's nice to see that they've used drums that sound like sort of analog drum machines.
Well, they have. There's a lot of live kit in there as well, actually.
Well, I want them, you know, there's little ones. There's boop, beep, boop, beep things. I want them back. I don't know why.
I remember I used to make huge keyboards worth of kind of blippy analog drum sounds, actually. In fact, I tell you what was a really good source of them was, oh, God, what was it? It was the Yamaha DJX, of all things. I recorded tons and tons of sounds out of the DJX when we were doing some of the first couple of Goldfrapp albums, and used it all over those. They just sound, there's just lots of little really unusual little funny little sounds, which are probably in turn came from
other drum machines.
Yamaha drum machines or Arranger keyboards. But yeah, I take your point. Yes, more blippy drums, please. In fact, isn't there Microtonic, the U-Tonic by Sonic Charge is a blippy drum machine. If I remember.
I mean, yeah, I mean, maybe people should be making their drums out of... I mean, I watched... going back to the 80s, I watched Fashions Move On the other day on video, because I just had it in my head for some reason. And those really splashy, kind of smashy Simmons drums are nice as well. So anything that's moving back to that sort of sounds fresh. And there's going to be a whole, like, generation of people that have never really heard these sounds, so it's going to sound remarkably fresh to them as well, isn't it? So,
well, we've talked about the Simmons drums in the past, haven't we? Because they just had so much bottom end, and they have been used quite a lot recently. But it's one of those sounds that is impossible to capture. You just have to. I've been looking for an SDS5 brain for ages. What I want there is a bright red Simmons drum kit as part of the set, the backdrop to Sonic. I just think that's my dream, but I just can't afford one.
You can borrow my black one.
All right.
I've said this before, haven't I?
Have you got a brain?
Yeah.
Ooh.
I've got 5. Yeah, 5. I've got a 5-piece brain.
A 5-piece brain.
And 5 pads.
There's some great.
The XLRs were wired a bit differently, but hey.
Okay. I just want to point. There's some absolutely fantastic 80s tribute bands names coming in here. Depeche Commode, Macwood Fleet, Depeche Commode, a Soccer Flea Girls. That's just. Oh, I better. Yeah, Depeche Foe then. Depeche Commode. That's great. Where was it? A Soccer Flea Girls. Yeah, some great 80s tribute bands name. I'm sure that, in fact, we could probably come up with some cracking ones. If I hadn't already thought of the Irish competition, it's too late. I'll have to maybe run that for another one if they ever run another one. But, hey. But, yeah, it's... let me see if I can go to the web page. It's funny, though, isn't it? There's something uncomfortable about trying to recapture the fashion of the time with people who are old enough to know better, but
yeah, it's not big and it's not clever.
But it's.
I don't know how to address this thing. I did email you some comments, but I don't know. It would be unkind to say them at this point.
I think the thing is that's part of the brand, isn't it?
Actually, I'm not doing that myself.
It's the brand, isn't it? I think really you couldn't really have Visage as a bloke, some blokes just dressed in suits or anything. You'd have to. There has to be an element of the kind of look to it. So they don't have any choice, do they? Really?
It'd be interesting to see the audience.
I think Boy George does it better, actually, in terms of we've taken that whole weird arty fashion thing and kind of very heavy makeup and all that kind of stuff, and Boy George has just taken it off in this really strange direction with all that kind of paint poured down his head kind of thing and different things stuck on his head and stuff. There's something more interesting about that because that's something, it looks kind of fresh and new that hasn't really been done before, whereas Steve Strange seems to be veering towards a kind of a maybe, I don't know what, I can't say it actually. I'm just gonna, but
I don't know, but you will be able, sorry,
in his defense, I think not colouring his hair and having what looks like, I'm assuming it's supposed to be grey hair, but having silver-coloured hair, which is in keeping with his age, is kind of cool in a way.
I take your point.
Stacking up, kind of, I'll stop talking, actually.
I take your point. It's funny, isn't it? Because Mr. Barnacle and the guitarist look like they could be old members of the Pistols. They look like sort of really old, and they're looking a bit shifty. Whereas the two in the middle, which is I've forgotten what her name is now. It's I've got it here. She's called Lauren Duvall. There was no evidence of her on any of the taster tracks. So I'd be interested to hear what her singing is on this because she's supposed to have a hell of a voice. But yeah, anyway, I'm digressing. It's got nothing to do with the way they look. But yeah, it sounds like it's quite interesting. The interesting they've put that whole thing about no soft synths. Produced by, I think there must be there must have been some typos in this because I looked at for these people, Steve Bryland and Sar Havlicek, who I think is a Slovenian producer. But I couldn't find any information about them at all anywhere. And when you see the collection of synths that they've got, I was just trying to find out how they might have got together, but I just couldn't see anything anywhere. There's another one. Howie's in there with Dry, Dry, Dry. That's a good one. That's a cracker. Moist, moist, moist. Yeah, that would be closer. Damp, 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 possibly.
I was looking at I can't remember the make of it, but I was looking at a can of dehydrated water on the internet earlier on. Is it Bernard's? There's actually a company that make dehydrated water, which is obviously an empty can, but I thought it was quite amusing.
Ah, okay, interesting.
Bit with that.
Yes, there's another great one from the chat room there, which is on the moist, 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 wet, wet, wet. I can't say it, but you can see it there, which I happen to agree with completely. Anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So, yes, Visage. Apparently you can go and see them at the 5th of June in London at the Hoxton Plaza. I think their ticket's still available. I don't know what that venue's like. I haven't seen it really, but pretty cool. And I'm just kind of, I just like the idea that it's going to be all right, you know, because it could so easily not be all right. But it seems to be actually, interestingly enough, there are a lot of longer-lived artists kind of coming out with what people consider to be their best works at the moment. You can look at what's his name, the Beatles bass player, Bowie, and there was somebody else as well who've come out with albums that people are just going, this is really, really good stuff. Geldop, you know, see what I mean? There seems to be a theme there. Anyway.
I liked Bowie's album. I bought Bowie's album and listened to it.
I haven't yet. I'm going to check it out. And what else did we get? Oh, yes, that's right. What would you call a new studio? Now, this I thought was kind of interesting. Again, another post in the We Are the Music Makers on Reddit, which was somebody who's opening a studio, and they were just kind of looking for names for a new recording studio, which just got me thinking, you know, obviously we can come up with some, no doubt, some amusing ideas for the name of a recording studio, but also, if you were to open a recording studio, what should it actually be these days? You know, what is a recording studio to you? And what if you were to go somewhere, what would it have to make you want to pay to go through the door? And because I thought that was quite an interesting kind of concept and a question that people must actually be having to answer in some way these days, because you know there are presumably some studios being opened by philanthropic individuals that maybe are thinking, you know, but mine's going to be different in that it doesn't have to make any money, perhaps. I don't know. What do you think, Dave?
What would I call it? Or what do I look for?
Well,
I had a good name studio years ago. I think I put it in my little blog thing. It was called DFA, and it was Don't About. About.
Do you have a high hourly rate?
Well, we after a load of gangster activity and a load of abstract nonsense and just rubbish, basically. It got robbed. That was quite amusing. So I decided to call it a day and rechristen it Done All. So that was it. And I've never named a studio after that, really. I've always gone to other studios. Yeah.
And when you're looking for if you were, I mean, presumably a lot of the time you're going to a studio that somebody else has booked for some whatever reason. But if you were to look for one yourself, what was it you would want from that studio as a studio these days?
Kind of depends what I'm doing. I mean, really, I think if I'm recording, you know, real instruments, then obviously you need a decent live room. I think the overriding interest for me is somebody who's actually really competent, because
somebody who knows how to operate it.
There is an awful, you know, this kind of, I find this with mastering engineers. Once you hear like one or two really excellent mastering engineers, you realise quite how many blaggers there are on the sort of scene who go, oh yeah, I've just mastered this album, and you listen to it and you're just like, it's actually not very good. Or, you know, there's no real overall consistency.
So I think up a bit.
yeah, exactly.
I've done that.
So yeah, it's I don't know really. I mean, I think we've gotten to the stage now where we use different studios for different things. Like, you know, when we were recording modular stuff for Iris and stuff, you know, we went into Benji's. That's perfect for all of that.
Because it's got all that stuff in it.
Yeah,
right, yeah.
You know, and of course it's maintained and, you know, at his expense as opposed to Chris's for a change. But other than that, I think probably, you know, somebody really knows what they're doing and a good live facility.
Well, that's interesting. You should say that, actually. Yeah. I don't know. What are you? Because I've got some ideas about that. What about you, Mark?
What's the question? What would I?
Well, what would you call one? And also, perhaps, if you're going to one, what is it that you would want? Or if you were going to open one, what would it offer that you think that, you know, you can't get anywhere else, that needs to be offered? Because it's, let's face it, opening a studio now might be considered by many to be suicidal, you know, because it's so hard to make any cash.
I mean, I did have a company name which was Extra Sonic Perceptions, as in ESP, a while ago, and I would probably stick with that name, actually, because what I'd want to offer people would be the mood of the place is more important than anything else, because we can record music anywhere now, can't we? I can take my laptop and I can go and sit in my car and record vocals if I want to, or I can go and sit in my shed or in space. Yes, exactly. So there you go. There's a mood of a place which you actually couldn't find anywhere else. So I think the mood of it's important. And I really do strongly believe that, you know, recording equipment is supposed to have like this bandwidth between, like, you know, the low end of hearing and the high end of hearing, but it picks up so much other stuff as well. So if and I'm not saying we are, because I don't want to get all like kind of woo woo on it, but if human beings are capable of having any kind of extra sensory communication, then it's going to go in the recording gear as well, isn't it? So in terms of like the mood of a place, I think audio recordings can possibly capture the mood of a place. Whether it actually translates back out the other end after it's been to a really poor mastering engineer or not, I don't know. So I'm laughing at my own jokes now. That's terrible. So that would be the first thing. So I would want a really big space. I would want to create some kind of playback environment that could, you know, I would have speakers in all the corners so that I could fly sound around in that space and do some really unusual things with sound, particularly so I could stand in the middle of the space wearing binaural microphones and then fly the sound around and record the effect of that. I suppose I would want, oh God, I'm going to go, am I going into fantasy land now?
No, that's all right, carry on.
I want walls that have a pine or maple on one side of them, a hard light wood on one side of them, and then I want the wall to turn round and turn into an anechoic chamber, so I can switch the walls between reflective and completely dead. That would be kind of cool.
That's cool.
Wow, that's a nice idea.
But more important than anything else is a huge range of different sounding microphones, and then lots of different ways of getting those microphones into my like Pro Tools or whatever I'm using. So lots of different ways of capturing sound, and lots of different sounding ways of capturing sound. And then of course I do think somebody that knows how to place microphones is probably essential.
Yeah.
Because like it's all well and good having like loads of different sounding mics, but you know, it's if the sound that we got on this particular record, or they got on that particular Led Zeppelin record, let's say, was, you know, the sound of a Reslo ribbon mic stuck on the edge of an AC30 cranked to the absolute full or whatever, it's got to, I mean, I would want to work with somebody that knows how to do that.
Right, have all of that recording knowledge. And yeah, that's an interesting idea, actually, and I think that makes a lot of sense for what you're saying.
But my favourite studio in the whole world, which is sort of approaching that, is a place called Funny Bunny. And it's run by a guy called Jeremy Stacey, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Jeremy Stacey.
What's it called? Funny Money?
Funny Bunny.
Oh, Funny Bunny.
But that guy, you go in there and you go, he goes, what kind of sound do you want? And you say, well, I'd quite like it to sound a bit like, and then you name a record, and he goes, oh yeah, they used this snare on that, and he'll bring out like, so he's got every kind of drum kit you can think of kind of shoved in storage units all around the place. And then he's got old EMI desks and like every kind of compressor you can think of, and all these different ribbon mics and condenser mics and all sorts of stuff. And he'll sort of try and recreate the recording environment that created that sound in the first place as best he can, or with his knowledge of it.
Oh, that's a really unique way of doing it as well, isn't it? That's kind of unusual. I like the sound of that.
Yeah, and it's because he's knowledgeable and he's sort of researched all of these things. He's quite good fun to work with as well.
Ah, interesting. I was thinking about this as well, because I mean, what I'd love to, I think it would be more a question of the space rather than the kit. So try and create a space where you'd have obviously a control room where you could do stuff and a good sounding room, but then you'd also have a really big space or an interesting funky space that you could stage events as well as performances, and you could partition it up in lots of different ways and treat it different ways. So for instance, one day it could be big drum session or whatever. Another day it could be a live streaming gig where you've got a band, load of cameras, some interesting sound, a bit of an audience, and you just turn, and you just basically repurpose it as much as possible. Because I think, and also the other idea is, and I think somebody said it in the chat room earlier back, which was create a space where there were sort of associated services and businesses around it, which is what's happening to a lot of recording studios now. Is as they close down and shrink, producers and programmers and people who are still working are taking up the spaces as they become available for rent, as it were. And so you get these kind of communities of musical and other kind of creative processes all around a space that has a purpose. And I like the idea of that. That would be fantastic. I mean, just to have a almost a community area, because I think you'll find that if you get the right collection of people, then there's all this stuff that buzzes off people. So, for instance, if we were there and we had this kind of facility, people go, oh, I want to do some video. Can we book in next Tuesday to do whatever,
I know with Underworld, they have a design facility, Tomato, and in certainly the sort of mid-90s, that was exactly the kind of ethos of the place. He was doing the graphics on such and such an ad, and so he was doing them, and then so I need somebody to do that, and it was an absolutely amazing place to be. And we tried. It's quite a difficult thing to kind of recreate out in the sticks. We tried a couple of times, and it's just like, so there's us and then a load of other really wealthy rock stars around here, and they don't want to be hanging around with us because they've got their big piles and their big studio, and we don't want to be hanging around with them because they're old. So it was quite an interesting turn of events.
Yeah, I think it's very. I mean, that's the one thing about again with us, in Bath being such a small place, there are very few. Although there are a lot of creative people around, there are very few places that are able to house that kind of thing. Whereas in London and larger cities, it's much more prevalent, isn't it? I mean, you see it, also see it in Sheffield as well with the electronic music scene. I mean, there's much more of that going on, and I think that's a limitation of, I guess, provincial life, unfortunately, which has other things to offer, but not that, sadly.
Yeah, and also I think, what happens in cities is that people are hungry for some kind of success. So, there will always be this kind of big melting pot of ideas and things. And if you can kind of galvanize that in some way, you stand a really good chance. What then happens is that as people make their money, they move further out and become slightly more insular. I've always found that quite frustrating about around here. I
suppose they do, but then they have access to their own facility whenever they want. And that's by the nature as you become more busy. And also, your schedule has to dictate your workflow and your work rate. If you've got to wait for somebody to finish doing something else, then it's harder to work to that thing, I suppose.
But if that environment, in a sense, becomes a muse, then you leave that environment. That's also why people make the most amazing albums, and then they move out somewhere else, and then their work goes up its own arse, I'm going to say, actually, to put it gently.
Yeah, that's a fair point, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, Chris and I are going to, we still intend to open a big analog recording studio with a ton of tape-based playing things, and we're going to walk around with white gloves all day going, don't touch that. Don't touch that. Wait, what do you think you're doing? I just really like the idea of doing that for a job.
I think you need a brown coat for that.
Yeah, brown coat, definitely.
I don't think a white coat works.
And a clipboard.
Yeah,
certainly white gloves. White gloves are compulsory.
Yeah, white gloves.
Yeah.
And whenever anybody says, "Can I just plug this synth?" Or I don't know about that. It's more than my job's worth to let you plug that CV gate into that CV gate. I don't know. We're gonna have to have a union meeting about this.
Yeah, we'll have to test the voltage, make sure it's compatible. I'm not sure it's going to work. That would be what a hell of a way to create modular patches with like a kind of a bloke going, no, you can't do that. Hold on a minute, I'll have to ask. Can you imagine? How fantastically unconducive to any form of creativity.
I don't know. The BBC managed for
for years,
didn't they? Whatever.
It's so true.
Bless them. Yes. Anyway, well, that sounds great. That's an interesting topic to perhaps finish on because it's now 5 o'clock. But yeah, I wish. Oh, sorry, Dave. Were you hoping for? Hold on. I can just see. Perhaps you could indicate to me which one you wanted to talk about. Was it Miss Radigue? Yes. Yeah. Well, all right. Let's get it in. Oh, that's a good one. Apache Studios. Spelt APATCHY.
Oh, very good.
I like that.
Good, yeah.
That's a cracker. That's a cracky one. Fantastically unconducive, my new studio, says John Van Eaton in the chat room.
Of course, I'm in mine in 2 weeks' time. In about 2 weeks' time.
Oh, of course, you're moving back out again. So, Dave, what are you going to do if, like, you get to your new place and you're hankering back for this? So does this mean we're going to have a new, you have a new backdrop, or is it as big as this, or have you got more space or less space?
More than this.
Oh. Cool.
Yeah, this is really tiny. Gaz came here the other day, in fact, and he went, it's smaller than it looks. But I showed him the new place, and yes, no, it's really, really, really exciting. I mean, this is the kind of culmination of, like, years and years of graft for me.
Wow.
All together in the studio with a view. I can't wait to show it to you.
Oh, I can't wait to see it. I'm really looking forward to it. I've got we got some exciting things planned, actually. I don't know if you've noticed, we've had a few people doing guest post blogs, actually, which has been really interesting. And we're going to start to sort of build that little army of contributors up. And we have this idea also to do a day in the life, which I would like to talk to all of you lot about doing something along that as well, because I think that could be kind of interesting. But I won't say any more. But if anybody is interested in contributing to Sonic, you can go to, I think it's sonicstate.com/pages/blog.cfm. There's a snappy URL if ever you've heard one. There are links on the site, but if you're interested in contributing, then do let us know. We've got kind of a workflow and a method, and we've had some great stuff in. I had a piece from Ed Egan today, and a couple of other people have posted some great stuff as well. So yeah, looking forward to that. But I guess really we should get on to this final and most thrilling topic. And now let me see. This is the I'm trying to remember what the blooming video is. I think it's this one. It's not that one because that's not a video. This might be it. Yes, here we are. This is the video in question, and this is probably the coolest auntie you could ever have, depending on your age.
Que j'ai eu envie de faire. Ça, c'est pour commencer. C'était cette musique-là et pas une autre.
You'll be here in a sec. This is Eliane Radigue. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not sure if I am at all. But she does this very interesting sort of drone kind of music, and this is her on the 2500, which is something that she's been using ever since she started working electronic music in the 1960s, up until year 2000. That was her only instrument that she used. And while it sounds like there's just a fan on really loud in the room, actually she's creating these kind of complex drone characters, and she does these sort of drone and feedback pieces, which some of them are challenging, but some of them are actually quite beautiful as well. And this is just a sort of a piece by the IMA. It's a profile of electronic artist, and it's just really very obscure.
J'ai un désordre
But
dans tout ça.
I didn't know.
Je suis pas ordonnée. Ah ben ça, c'est le
These are the scores that she has on tracing paper.
Voilà.
She's developed a whole
Alors là,
notation
comment
system, I think.
Elle commence à présenter.
It's fantastic. Anyway, I won't play the whole thing because I'll get busted. But yeah, it's very. If you search for Eliane Radigue on, what I might do is play a little bit of this drone that the piece called. This is Jetson Miller from 1986. If I play that and just sort of keep it in the background, I don't know if you'll be able to hear it. Actually, you lot, that might not work because you'll get you'll be able to hear it on the broadcast. If I press play, you'll be able to hear. And Dave, I just, when I saw this, I can't remember how it came about, but I just saw it and I tweeted rather flippantly, I want her to be my auntie because she would just be a brilliant auntie. That's only ever happened to me a couple of times. And one of the other people was an artist called Helen Chadwick. I was working on a CD-ROM at Real World, which was one of the Eve things, the Peter Gabriel things, and she came in and we had to interview the artists talking about their work, which is, as we know in British modern art, is the one, or any modern art these days, contemporary art, it's about how you can talk about it. And she was just totally captivating, and she was brilliant. And we just left and we was like, oh, do you want to come to my house for tea? Come meet my mum. She was just really, anyway, but she sadly passed away not long after from a heart attack. But Eliane Radigue, I guess Radigue is still going. This is a piece. She was, I just thought, how cool is that to have, like, I'm guessing she's in her 60s, possibly 70s now, and just sort of an expert on the ARC 2500. Dave Spears, you had some input to this. I know I've obviously rambled on over most of it.
It's beautiful. It really is beautiful. I just thought, I found it surprising that you were surprised that I absolutely adore this kind of
I must admit, I do miss the chorus, you know, and the floating.
Well, you know, if you flip it on 45, you might be able to dance to it, but it's like there is, and I think that's a real key point, that everything now is fast paced and in your face, and everything is soundbite, whereas there's something beautiful about this kind of way of working. It's not about reaching the chorus in 3 minutes or reaching the 3.5 minute pop song kind of deadline. It's about the spaces in between, hugely fluid and constantly kind of moving sonic soundscapes. And for me, I love it, and I will put synths on. I mean, one of my favorite actually is to put the Oscar and the Imp on a kind of a drone and modulate the resonance and do all sorts of things like that. And I can work like that all day because actually I find it really soothing. In fact, I had this kind of weird conversation with Gaz the other day. We were talking about the Talk thing, and there's a particular track, I can't remember what it's called, I think it's After the Flood, where there's just what I consider to be the greatest guitar solo ever, and it's a single note, but everything resonates at different frequencies, so there's all these harmonics coming out, and I think it's to do with the fact that people, you know, everything resonates at a different frequency, animate and inanimate objects, and certain things may appeal to you and certain things don't. And as you can probably gather, I could go on for bloody hours about it, so it's probably time that I shut up.
No, I agree. I mean, this piece was the most melodic I could find. Like I say, this is called Jetson Miller from 1986, and she was really into the Tibetan. Oh God, no! Oh, what have I done? She was really into Tibetan Buddhism and converted and became a kind of spiritually sort of guided by, and obviously heavily influenced. And what was quite interesting, I was reading a lot of the stuff about her. And she was born in 1932, and at the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, she created a single 3-hour work, which is called Trilogy de l'Amour, which is which is part of the, and this is interesting, the first part of the Kaima intermediate states that followed the continuum of 6 states of consciousness. And I just thought it was very interesting that some of those terms, you know, have kind of found their ways into. Isn't the Kaima the sound generation for the Haiku continuum? I just wonder if those things are related. That was just a completely random, but
it's a slightly different spelling. But that piece is actually a really brilliant piece. There is just this kind of, and it is, the only words I can use to describe it is fluid movement within that. And I mean, actually, nothing really happens for kind of 35 minutes.
No, I found myself fast forwarding, and then I'll go, oh, something's changed, and then I would go back to see what actually happened, and it's usually a very slow transition into it. So it's,
yeah, no, I find it really an astonishing piece in the way that there's these kind of tiny changes in resonant textures, and for me it's kind of, it's almost pure music. It's not designed to be showy, it's not designed to be anything other than fluid and just evolving constantly. And also, when you put it into the context of an installation, you can get all these happy accidents and harmonics and tones like that. And I love this kind of real beautiful attention to detail. I've had conversations with certain sound designers, probably from an artistic bent, but we will talk about tuning resonances and fine-tuning resonances and modulating things to such a minuscule degree that, you know, most people, you'd listen to it and you'd laugh, but
well, you can hear it here in this. I don't know if this is coming through, but you can hear that there's a very gentle oscillation around the harmonics, which is obviously a resonant filter going. I mean, I'm assuming it is, unless it's the balance or the beating of different frequencies together.
And I'd love the idea of being able to say, I'm just popping round my auntie's house to have a go on the 2500.
Yeah.
I was very disappointed at the end of the video when it said she's no longer, she's currently only composing for acoustic instruments. I felt very let down.
Yeah. Or maybe she couldn't find anyone to fix her 2500. Harmonic massage seems to be going around in the chat room. That's a nice way of putting it. I know, Mark. I'm kind of. I'm guessing that some of this might appeal to you because you're into the sort of.
Oh, it does.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Absolutely. But three things spring to mind. And the first one is the music of the planets thing. It kind of reminds me of that a little bit.
Harmonic resonances, yeah.
Yeah. And all of those different, just slowly, gently shifting kind of frequencies. But it also reminds me of this emerging kind of thing called sound therapy, which people are getting more and more into, and gong baths and all that sort of stuff. And you keep seeing it turn up.
Harmonic massage, gong bath. There we go.
Yeah. Sound massage and gong bath. And those, when you rub those singing bowls, you get like lots of different harmonic frequencies kind of happening.
Oh yes, the Tibetan singing bowls, that's right.
So I guess that's sort of relevant to it. But and in the 80s I bought these CDs. There was this CD called Tintibulation, I think, which was all I can't remember if it was synthesized or if it was organic, but it was just this CD which was about an hour long, which really didn't do it justice because it could have evolved for like many more hours of like these kind of like, it was music to sleep to basically. I've always slept to either, you know, white noise or something. I like having something just gently whirring away in the background because you just kind of lull into it and go off into some kind of strange dreamscape. But watching that video, when she said it takes 2 years to complete a piece, and she said the first year she spends finding the right sounds, and then it sort of creates itself from where she's found all the right bits and put bits on tape and edited them up and all that kind of stuff, and then she spends the second year arranging it. And I just find that utterly extraordinary.
That puts our kind of 90s programming chops into shame, doesn't it?
Well, on mine, if it's taken me more than 2 hours to complete the entire song, then I've probably gone astray somewhere and, you know, got absorbed in the wrong thing, maybe. But
she probably gets a grant, though.
Yeah, well, that is a very valid point, actually, Dave, because, I mean, France are very supportive of kind of all sorts of lost causes, into commercial lost causes, because, I mean, obviously, I can't imagine any way that she would be commercially able to do much with this. I mean, I couldn't imagine record sales are going to generate much of a lifestyle for her, but I'd imagine she probably does get a grant, and France is very good at that sort of thing for the arts and also for a lot of businesses, actually, that you kind of wonder, how on earth have they kept going for so many years and what have you, and then you realise, oh, they're probably getting a grant. There is another French connection, actually. What's the name of those lovely people? I can't remember the names of them now. They're French and they make body sensors and also synthesizers as well. I wish I could remember now. The chat room might remember. No, they're current stuff. Really nice people. I just am absolutely, my mind has gone complete blank. But they've made this sort of quite large custom, or a case-sized custom modular, which has all the modules interpatchable, but they're also named as sort of telemetry and planetary parameters. So the whole thing is geared around this whole music of the planets. I wish I could remember what it was. I feel terrible for not having brought it up. That
sounds really interesting.
It's not Arturi. They made the On Martinos recently, the remake of that.
Oh yes, yeah.
Oh God, I wish I could remember what they're called. I feel terrible because I see them every year. They're really lovely people, and I feel ghastly now because I can't think who they are. Ons Martinet. No, right. Okay, let's see. Is that how you spell it? Oh gosh, that's unlikely. Who are
the French seem to be very good at this, though, don't they? If we're talking about French, because they've got the Pompadour.
Yeah, the IR. Is it IR?
And then this whole Urcam thing as well, which is over there. So it's a shame we don't. I mean, we did have the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, didn't we? But then it didn't. What happened to that? It got
axed,
privatised, and axed, didn't it? Yeah.
I like the idea of going to the government and going, I need a year to work on these sounds, please.
Yeah, and I live in Paris, so I need loads of money.
I'll pay you back when I can, and then I need another year to put them together. But I love the other bit that she was saying about, you know, when she's doing the installation composition.
Earwave, yes. Sorry, chat room. I was looking at it's Earwave. They make on Martinu speakers as well. Yes, very interesting stuff. Sorry about that. I was lost in Google, not really looking at the chat room. I do beg your pardon.
No, we have to know. We have to know these things.
Yes, it'd be great. Earwave. Sorry, that's Howie. Yes, mechanic. Everybody, they all got me. I'm terribly sorry about that. That was an awful piece of ignorance. I should actually say that the chat room are sort of the extra brain that I'm often missing. At least I can only speak for myself. The giant turbo brain. I just
saw the word gamelan fly past then, actually, and that's a very valid point. It is very much like an electronic kind of gamelan, isn't it?
Yes. Earwave, that's right. And I just can't remember the name of it. I did see it when I was at Mesa, but it was not patched up, and I couldn't film anything. And when I'd come back, it was all a bit late. But yeah, but it's worth listening. I mean, like I say, I'm very much kind of pop head, so I find listening to it, but I think it's the sort of thing that if you put on and listen through to the end, you appreciate it much more for it being there. But if you're just trying to listen to it, go see what it's like, it doesn't work on that level, does it really? It has to be almost background, rather than, you can't really listen to it with a very clinical and dissecting sort of point of view, unless you perhaps already
it's quite emotive. I think it's quite emotive, and I think almost on a kind of subconscious level. I love a lot of it. You know, John Hassel, all those kind of guys, you know, sort of more modern composers, just the way they approach things from that. It's a very I keep coming back to the same blooming word, and I fluid all the time. But it just seems to kind of flow very naturally, and it's not. Sometimes when you put somebody who purports to be some kind of patch or sound designer in front of a synth, everything, it just is kind of, it's all a bit disjointed and jarring and annoying. Whereas I like this kind of, you get this flow from one thing into another.
Yeah, I think I in fact, when I was doing the MS-20 Mini review, I had it patched up with the modular over there, and I was kind of doing this, adding just loads and loads of elements to these large drones, because I obviously had 2 oscillators, and I had audio rate modulation, and all this other stuff, and I had to do that because obviously the output of the Korg MS is Hertz volt, and the other stuff is volt octave. So I just had to tune everything to a note, and then, you know, rather than play it, just kind of turn things up and down against it. So, but yeah, I suppose we might be at the point where we could sort of say goodbye to and finish up. And I feel rather sort of chilled and mellow after having that in the background.
Nice.
I really do think that you should check it out. Eliane Radigue, and there's some great. And she was not. This is totally coincidental, but there's a few of the videos show her pictures of her when she was sort of in the 60s and 70s, and she was foxy as well, which must have been quite. I mean, not that it has anything to do with anything. It has nothing to do with anything, but it's sort of it's a nice. Oh, I don't know. It's just it pleased me more, even more, if that's possible, to think that she wasn't a sort of nerdy kind of, you know. She was actually seemed like a kind of. I'm going to shut up because I'm just digging myself a massive hole. Right, but once again, I want to say thank you to our sponsors. Don't remember Iris free 10-day trial, isotope.com/Iris, and also don't forget, if you want to win a copy of Iris, then leave a comment below which somehow uses Iris in a haiku. Which, if you need to know what a haiku is, look it up, and it will give you a rough idea on about how you construct a haiku poem. So, looking for Iris has to be either the subject or, you know, involved in some way. And I guess the one that we like the best will win a copy of Iris. Leave it in the YouTube comments below, or in the show notes. We have a comment system as well. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can head over there, and you don't need to log in or whatever. So, yeah. Thank you very much. So we'll say goodbye to our contributors. Mark Tinley over there. Nice to see you again, Mark, and see you another time. Thanks for joining us.
Indeed. I will return another time. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. See you soon. And, of course, we'll go back to Dave Spears with his lovely modular over there, which will be in a different... Will it be in a different background next week?
I don't know, is the honest answer. Probably not, no. Windows are going in Tuesday. Skirting and doors and architrave, I think, Thursday. So maybe I might get in over the weekend and start. But I'm gonna. This room's gonna evolve. I'm not gonna.
Don't forget to put some conduit under the floors so you can run some cables under the floors.
Oh no, it's too late for that. Floor's gone in. Floor's gone in. Insulation's gone in. Everything's gone in. But it's really nice because Chris is doing very a similar kind of thing, and actually it's really nice because that means I don't have to have everything in one room. So we're just going to take our time and bring stuff out of storage. But there's so much stuff that I'm pining for now. You know, it's been like 5 months. I really want my Wurlitzer piano back.
Yeah. You always turn in and hammer out a tune, a few augmented ninths, major sevenths.
Tell you what, the neighbours ain't going to know what's hit them. Anyway. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anyway, that's it. That's it for this week. That was Sonic Talk number 314. Thanks everybody for watching.